Welcome to my Quest system mini-series, part of the Action RPG tutorial series. We're going to be building a quest system that is quite robust and will allow you to build a game where the player can accept quests from NPCs and interact with other items in the world to complete and progress those quests, as well as reward things like experience points and items to your player. And in this first edition of the Quest system tutorial videos, we're going to be building the QuestManager script, which is a global autoload script that's going to allow us to access, manipulate, and even save all of the required data. So stay tuned. Hi, my name is Michael. Welcome to my 2D action and adventure RPG tutorial series. Follow along and learn how to create your own ARPG in Godot 4 using GD script. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what this quest system is going to entail. So the first thing that we're going to build to make this work is a quest manager. This is going to be an autoload global script. So it's a singleton, right? That's always available and other scripts can access it. And we need to build in some basic integration with this and some existing systems like our player manager and the save manager so that, we can save our quest progress and update the player as needed, like when we need to reward items or experience points. Now, we haven't really used experience points in our player, but we're going to implement that. So if you want to start, taking that and running with it, you can. Okay, so there's some integration with pre-existing systems. We also need to build some new node types that we can use to interface with the quest manager and the quest system. So we're going to have some quest progression nodes that will allow the player to advance a quest, right? Whether that be through some sort of trigger in the scene or through dialogue or collecting an item. And we also need quest dependent nodes that will help us do things like add conditions to scenes, like maybe removing a door or changing the dialogue options from an NPC, or maybe removing or adding an NPC altogether. And lastly, we're going to need to build some user interface so that we can appropriately communicate all of the quest progress and actions to the player. So we'll have a quest UI that will be alongside our inventory in the pause menu, and this quest UI will display all of the quests and their current progress. And we'll also have a quest notifications user interface, and actually we'll build kind of a generic notification UI that we can just push a message to, and it'll pop it up over the game scene. So these are all the things that we're going to be building. And we're going to begin in this video by building our quest manager, and we're going to build it to almost feature completeness. It's going to have the vast majority of the functions and variables that we need to make all of this happen. So we're going to build that out, and then as we go throughout the subsequent videos, we'll tie into those functions and functionality to produce the rest of the system. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with building that quest manager. Now, obviously what I just reviewed was pretty high level and missing a lot of the details of what we need to do, but let's go ahead and go to our file system. And the first thing we're going to do is create the files and the folder structure that we're going to use to build the system. And I want to begin by creating a folder for our quests. And normally in the past, I've created all of our global type scenes in this globals folder. I'm going to break convention on this one for the quests and put it in our new quest folder. I might regret that decision later, but that's what I'm going to do. So let's create a new folder here in the root folder. We'll call it quests, and then we can open that folder. And inside the quest folder, let's create a few things here. We're going to make a folder for our scripts. And then I also want to make a new folder where we will store some of the nodes that we're going to build in the future. And I'm going to call this utility nodes. And we're actually going to end up with some other parts of this quest system that are scattered about, because when we get to the user interface pieces, those are going to be, up here in the UI and things like that. Okay, but anything that's specific or new and derives directly from this new quest system will go in here. And this folder, quest folder, is also going to house all of the quest resources that we create, okay, so that we have a place to go and find them. So let's go into the scripts folder. And before we create the quest manager, I'd like to begin by creating a quest resource. So let's create a new script in here. Okay, and we'll just call it, we can call it a quest_resource and open this up. Okay, so we'll give this a class name of quest. And instead of extending node, this is a resource, right? So we got to change this to extends resource. You could have selected that from the little new script dialog. And what do we need in our quest resource? It's going to be fairly simple, and I want to make this clear how I'm building this. Our quest resource is going to be this quest resource is going to be designed to describe a quest and its rewards, but it will not track quest progression or completion. Okay, so what that means in practice is we only need the information within this resource that help describe what the quest is. So we can start with an export variable for a title, so that our quest has a title we can display, right? And that's of course a type string. We'll export another string. This one we're going to export multi-line so that we have a large text box to edit this one. But this string variable we'll call the description. Next, we're going to export a variable that we'll call steps. What are the steps required to complete this quest? And the steps will be an array of strings. You could make the steps a different resource object that's more advanced, that has, extra information, but I don't want to make too complex of a quest system. This quest system will be extendable if you want to add to it. It wouldn't be too hard to do so, but for the sake of building something that works for the majority of smaller games, or even a game jam type game, this will be sufficient. Just some, essentially the steps, the strings will just be like the title or the name of each step. Okay, so that's what we're going to do there. And then let's export two more variables. Let's export a variable for the reward underscore XP, and this can be an integer value. How much experience will the player gain from completing that? I have an error up here because I put an S on strings. That's singular. An array of strings is still just a type string, right? Okay. And then let's export one more variable. We will call this variable reward underscore items. This will also be an array. Okay. But actually, we need to create a resource type for these reward items. So like what we're going to do here with the reward items, if you wanted to take a similar approach to the steps, you could. But let's come down here. Well, let me just save that real quick. I'm going to come down here and create a new script in our folder. And we will call this one, we'll call this resource the quest item, well, let me change that. Not quest item, quest reward item. Okay. Now, this is a pretty straightforward little script. All it's going to be responsible for is allowing us to track what the reward the player would receive would be, and how many of that item they would get. So let's give it a class name real quick, and we can call this quest reward item. And it extends resource as well. Okay, quest reward item. And this can export a variable for the item. And if you've been following along with this tutorial, we already have an item data resource type. So we will use that here. So we can just use one of our existing items or create a new one. And then we'll also export a variable that we will call quantity. And that will be an integer. I'm going to set it to 1 actually by default. Okay, so that it has an assigned value when we start this. But just how many of the items will the player be rewarded upon completing the quest? So let's go back to our quest resource. Here we go, to this script. So this array is going to be an array. It's going to be an array of those resources that we just created, right? The quest reward item. Okay. And I'm going to assign this to an empty array. That doesn't probably make a difference, but there we go. That's everything that constitutes a quest that we're going to build in our system. Okay. So the title and description, text fields that we can display to the player. The steps are also text fields, but it's dynamic because we can have multiple, or we could have none even. Reward experience and reward items. Now, the things that you don't see in here, there's no way to know which of the steps were completed. We only know what the steps are, but that's okay. That's by design. And likewise, there's no way to determine if this quest has been completed or accepted for that matter. Okay. But we're not going to handle that within this object because, again, the purpose of this resource is going to strictly be to describe what a quest is. Before we make our QuestManager script, let's go to the quests folder right here, and let's go ahead and create a couple resources based on our new quest type. So I'm just going to right click and say new resource. And in our resource, the create new resource dialog, we can just type in quest, and it should appear. We've got quest reward item, and we've got quest. So I'm going to select quest and click create. And now we need to give this quest resource a name. And I'll just call this like a short quest. Okay. And when we select this, you can see over here in the inspector, we can see this resource. So I'm going to give it the same title, short quest, because these are just test example quests. Okay. You would give them more appropriate names. An example short quest with only one step to complete it. I don't know, required to complete it maybe. We can give it some reward experience points if we want to, like maybe 10. We could go to the steps array and we could increase this to 1 and give it a step. And maybe this step is just simply complete quest. Okay, that's not the real kind of steps you would want, but you know, just as an example. And then reward items, we could come down here and we could give it a reward item. In fact, I'm going to leave this one empty on this guy. Let's leave it to 0 for reward items. And let's create 2 more quests. I'm going to, so that we have some examples to play with, I'm going to create another resource quest. And I'm going to call this one long quest. Okay. A long quest with multiple steps. So then we can come down here to our steps and maybe we say like there's 5. And just for sake of brevity, I'm going to say step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Reward XP, let's make it 5 times what it was for the other one, 50. And then quest items, let's go ahead and give some quest items to this one. I'll give it 1 quest item. So once we create it, we're going to need to create a new quest reward item resource in here. We could create a resource for it out here and then drag it in, but I think it's fine to just let this resource be saved in the other resource, right? It's just going to be part of that data. So what this quest resource consists of is an item and a quantity. So I can quick load an item. And let's say it gives them 3 apples. Okay, so this quest is going to reward 50 experience points and 3 apples. And then I'm going to create one more quest here real quick. And I'm actually going to create a kind of a real quest. We're going to use this one in our final example as we work through this. And I'm going to just call this recover lost flute. I think that's what I want to call it. If you recall, we've got this NPC. In fact, he's here in this scene, right? Who the way I've built it, he asks the player here if he would retrieve his magical flute from the dark dungeon. So we'll use this quest and associate it with him later on. We're not going to associate this quest with him now, but I'm just thinking ahead. So recover lost flute. We'll say recover lost. I think it was a magical flute. And then I'll just, I don't know, did this NPC have a name? I can't remember. Did we give it a name in the dialogue text? Let's see, where's our NPC? Here we go. NPC 2, his name is Nero. Okay. Copy that. Nero has tasked the player, or the hero, with retrieving his lost magical flute from the dark dungeon. Okay. And then this is a big quest. We'll say 100 points maybe. You'll have to pick experience points that seem appropriate with whatever it is you're doing in your game. You know, coming up with an experience scheme is not something that we're covering in this video, but in the future we'll talk about that and how to make more of an RPG system with stats and whatnot. Okay, so let's look at this quest. It should have a few steps. All right, so we'll give him some steps. Let's give him 2 steps. The first step can be called find the flute, or find maybe magical flute. And then this next step could be return magical flute to Nero. Okay. And we'll give it some reward items. I'm going to give it 2. Let's give it a new quest reward item. And then I can pick an item, quick load. I've kind of been using this gem as maybe a de facto item for money, and we're not displaying it in the UI. So I'm going to just go with that for now, even though I think it would be nice to have it like a gold or gem specific interface somewhere, if that's the case. But let's say he gives us 100 gems, and he also maybe rewards us with some potions or something like that, because that's an item I know I've got, potion. And he'll give us 5 potions. I don't know. Okay, so there we go. We've got some quest resources set up. So they're ready for us to test and play with and use within our QuestManager system. Okay, so now that we've got this, let's go back to our scripts folder and let's create the global script that we're going to use for our QuestManager. Okay, we'll create it in here. We'll create a new script. We can call it, I'm going to give it the name global_quest_manager. Okay, so this script, we don't need to give it a class name because this is going to be a global script. We're going to add it to our autoload. Okay, so let's just make a comment about that. QuestManager This is a global script. Okay. And extending node is just fine for this one. So let's create a couple of variables here, and then let's also register this in our project as an autoload script. So first of all, we're going to want a signal. This QuestManager will have only one signal for now. It's a simple signal that will be called quest updated. And it's not only going to do that, emit a signal, but the signal will contain a reference to the quest. This way, when we update a quest, if any other script in the future needs to be notified of that or wants to listen for that event, they can, okay? We're only going to use that slightly in this series, but it'll be a handy tool if you want to extend this system as well. We're also going to have a variable that we call quests. And this is an array, you guessed it, of quest items, okay? And this item is going to keep track of all of the quests in our game, not just the ones that the player has active, but all of the quests in the game. And because those quests describe the quests, we're going to have another array, and this one we will call current quests. And this is an array, and I'm just going to leave it alone as an array for right now. Now we're not going to type this array because we're going to be using kind of a custom dictionary in here. Because that'll interface well with our save system and it makes it easy to manipulate. Just felt easier to me not to type this array. So it'll just be a generic array. And so let's set up the last variable that we're really going to need in here. And this can actually be a constant variable. Let's call this constant. And we'll call this I'm going to do this in all caps. I like to do my constants in all caps. So quest data location. And this is a string. And what it is it's going to be this folder where we are going to hold our quests. So right now, all these quest resources are in the quests folder. I'm just going to drag this here. That way, if you've got your quests in a different location, you can drag and drop that there. But it is important that we keep all of our quests in this folder. Okay, all of the quest resource files need to be in that folder because that's where we're going to look for them, and we're going to use that to populate this quests array. All right. And lastly, before we move on and start really building this QuestManager system, let's go into project settings, and I'm going to go over to globals, and underneath the autoload tab, let's create a new autoload global from our script. So I'm going to just click on that and let's find it. So if I can find quests, scripts, global QuestManager. I'm going to change the name. I want to remove global from that name and just have it be called QuestManager, and then I'll add it. So there, it appears here. Once you add that script, it should appear somewhere in your list. It'll be at the bottom, okay? And make sure you don't unclick enabled because that would deactivate it. And there we go. So now our QuestManager is going to load every time our project runs. And every script will have access to it through the name that we just gave it, QuestManager, with capital Q and a capital M. Okay, so next step, I'd like to kind of go through the various functions that we're going to need in our QuestManager. And we'll define them, just the function name without any scripting happening just yet, just so we can talk about what all the functions are and where we're going with this QuestManager. Hopefully to give a nice broad overview of what we're writing so that it makes, I'm hoping, a little bit more sense as you're following along with the tutorial. The first function is just the ready function, right? We want to do some stuff when this script loads, okay? And really the ready function is just going to be doing one thing right now, and that's gather all quests, and then we'll have them put into our quests array. And we're going to actually write a separate function to do that. So that'll be the first function here after the ready function. It'll just be called gather quest data. And like the function says in its name, we're just going to gather all quest data and put it into the quests array, okay? And by quest data, I mean all quest resources, right? Okay, so that's what this function is going to be responsible for. We're going to have another function, a pretty obvious function, and this function will be called update quest. And this function will just update the status of a quest. And we'll talk more about what that will be, okay? But that's what that one will do. I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory. Obviously, we're going to do a few things with it. We're going to want a function down here that we'll call disperse quest. Maybe there's a better name than disperse. I don't know. Disperse quest rewards. So when a quest is complete, we can hand out the rewards to the player. And I'll just say this here. Give XP and item rewards to player. Now the next function after this one, we're going to have several. In fact, we're going to make 3 different functions that allow us to find or look up a quest in our quests array, but they're all going to serve different purposes. And so the first one, we'll have one just called find quest, I guess. Need to put func there. Okay. And this is going to return a quest. I take that back. That's not going to return a quest. That's going to return a dictionary. And you'll see why. And what we'll do here is this function, we're going to provide it actually with a quest. So let me put that in here. We're going to say quest is required. It's a required argument for the find quest. So what we're going to do is provide a quest and return the current quest associated with it. Okay, so I guess as an example, you know, if the player has started the long quest and we're trying to find it, that we could pass in the long quest, and this will return the dictionary associated with that, which is going to contain the values like the current completed steps, or if it's completed, things like that. Okay, so there's our find quest, and this needs to return something. I'm just going to say return null for now, even though we won't do that in the future. Or I don't think I can return null. We'll just return a dictionary. Okay, these little squiggly lines, that's a dictionary. We need another find function that we'll call find quest by title. Okay, and so obviously we want to provide a title, which is a string, and this one's actually going to return the actual quest resource. Take title and find associated quest resource, just like that. I think this one we can return null, and it won't give us an error. Yeah. And then I also want one last type of searching or finding functionality, and this one we'll call get quest index by title. And so obviously this one will require us to pass in a string that is the title that we're looking for, and it will return an integer, find quest by title name, and return index in quests array. And by default, we'll just return a -1, like so. And actually we'll use that -1 will be kind of like a false value, like we didn't find it. Okay, so we're actually going to be able to keep that as is. Okay, so we've got a few functions in here: updating a quest, dispersing quest rewards, 3 different ways to find a quest. You might be wondering why we need 3, and they each serve different functions, so you'll see that as we build this out. Lastly, I think we want to have a sort quests function. We'll just call this sort quests. And for now, especially because we're not going to use this function today, I'm just going to leave it blank. But we are going to want a way to be able to sort quests, and we'll build that functionality later. Okay, we're going to sort them eventually alphabetically, but also by which quests have been completed and which ones haven't. So they'll be kind of grouped together appropriately. And there we have it. So there's our basic quest manager system. These are the functions and variables that we need to be able to track and work with this. And this is what we're going to work with. Again, this is going to be fairly feature complete by the time we're done fleshing out each of these scripts. And so by the time we're done with this video, with the exception of the fact that it'll be hard to integrate into the world without any help, you're going to have everything you need to get going if you want to. Let's take a look here. We've got this gather quest data function that we created. And as mentioned, we actually want to call this here in our ready function. So let's build this out and get this ready so that we have something working. So we're going to gather all of the quest resources within the folder that we've specified here, this quest data location. And we're going to put them all together inside this quests array. That way, when we're running the game, this quest manager always has access to all the quest resources that we need, so that, in the future, when we have nodes that want to update or add a quest to the player or whatever the case may be, they have access to that data through this quest manager. Okay. So down here, let's go ahead and get this started. Let's make a new variable that we call quest files. And this is going to be a variable that we derive from this DirAccess global that's built into Godot. And what we want to do is say get files at, and we provide a location. Okay, so in here we can give the quest data location. And let's go ahead and just look at this real quick. So get files at returns a packed string array containing file names of the directory contents, excluding directories at the given path. The array is sorted alphabetically. Okay, so if you go back to our quest manager, what that means is it's going to give us an array of strings that represent the path to each of these quest files, right? Because it said it's going to gather all of the files in that folder excluding directory. So it's not going to get scripts or utility nodes or any of its child items. It's just going to get these 3 files right now. And obviously any future ones we add. Okay, so that's what this quest files is going to contain. And in fact, that's of type packed string array, which I don't know that we really need to put it, but let's do that for fun. Packed string array. Okay. And the packed part of a packed string array just means that it's stored and saved in such a way that it's more performant. At least that's the layman's term description, as best as I understand it. Now, the other thing we want to do when we gather quest data is just to be safe. I'm going to call this quests.clear to make sure that our quest array doesn't have anything weird in there. Okay. And if for some reason in the future you wanted to be able to gather quest data after quests have been added to the folder, let's say there's the ability to do so during the game even, then you would need to clear this array to be able to add them appropriately. Just grab them all again from scratch. I mean, I guess there's other ways to do that, but the next what we're going to do is we're going to say for q in quest files. So we're going to iterate over each file that we get in this quest files packed string array. And for each one, we're just going to do this. We're going to append them first to our quests array, right? Real quick, a comment about this. This isn't super safe because if you were to put other files in this folder that were not quest resources, they'd end up in your array and they're not going to be of type quest. So you're going to run into issues if you're using this folder for anything else. So just a warning right here, if you're going to follow this strictly, just only put quest resource items in this folder, okay? If otherwise, we could do a check. We could check if the item is of that type of resource and then add it to the array if we wanted to. But for simplicity, assuming that you're using it the same way as me, and you're only putting quest resources in here, then we're just going to go ahead and add it. But we can't just add the Q because the Q is just a reference to the location of the file. So what we need to do is say load. Okay, and then in here we'll get our quest data location plus a slash plus Q. Okay, so what that's going to do is it's just going to go through. It's going to create a path based off of the quest data location and the name of the quest resource. Okay, and then we're going to just say as quest here to make sure that it gets passed in as the right kind of object. And there we go. That's the end of that for loop. That's all it does. And then let's just do this. Let's print our quest's size of our array so we can see how many it finds. And then let's see what happens when we print the quests array. I actually didn't test printing the whole array, but so it might not look nice. But I'm going to go ahead and run our project. Now, before I run it, let me just preface, this script is an autoload script. And so it's going to call its ready function as soon as the game loads, which is going to call this function. Okay. And it's just going to grab quests from here. So it doesn't matter if we've done anything in the game with our quests. We're just checking to see if the script is able to find and identify all of the resources. And I have it on the screen there. Okay, here we go. It did output some stuff to the console. It found 3, and these are the resource references. It looks like we've got an error in here. Oh gosh, really, this animation range issue? Okay, that was probably something on my Michael Games startup screen. So you may or may not get that error, but it seems like I had a keyframe out of place in my animation, which apparently is something I do quite a bit. I don't know what my problem is. I'm going to go ahead and just delete this print quests. I'm going to leave the print quest size. You can as well. So then as you add quests, you should see this number increase. And in fact, we could come in here and say quest count, something like that. Okay. So then when we run the scene or the game, we should get that little, there we go, quests count 3. Okay. So we know that the first step is more or less working. We're not doing anything with the quests, but we are gathering them. Cool. So let's move on. We've built this gather quest data. The next one in the list is update quests, but I want to save that one for later. Same with disperse quest rewards. I want to come down to these find quest functions, and I want to play with these, build them out, because this is a good start. And we're going to need these at some point to be able to update our quests, okay? Or at least to be able to use them with other nodes. So looking at our find quest, I'm going to go ahead and actually just take this text description and pop it out here because that makes more sense. What we're doing here is this function, we're providing a quest resource, and then we're expected to return the corresponding dictionary item from the current quests, okay, which right now is empty, okay? So let's do this. I want to set this up. This function is actually going to be quite important for the future tutorials. We're not going to use it a ton today, but I'm going to go ahead and just write this out. For Q in quests, actually no, so for Q in current quests, so what we want to do is we want to iterate through the current quests that the player has in the game, and then we'll just do a check. If the title of that quest matches the title of the quest that we passed in, then we know we found it, and then we can return that current quest. And then if we iterate through all the current quests or we have no current quests, then that means we haven't found the quest. Maybe the player doesn't have it. And this is the first time we're going to look at an interface with the structure of these quest items. And so let's do this. We're going to give it a title. If we don't find it, then we're going to give it a title of not found. And then this dictionary, these current quests, is going to look like this. Each quest is going to have a title because that's going to be the identifier that we'll use to connect them. There's going to be a variable called isComplete, which is a Boolean, and by default we'll set that to false. So if we don't find it, obviously it's not complete. And the only other thing that this current quests dictionary is going to contain is a variable that we call completed steps. And this is going to be an array, and I'm just going to make it an empty array with a single empty string, I guess I should say. Okay. So that's what we're going to return. And I'm going to go ahead and copy this. So up here, this current quests array, let's just put this up here as a reference. This is what our current quests array, this is what each item in the array is going to look like. It's going to look something like this. Okay. It's going to have a title, a Boolean, whether or not it's been completed, and then a list of the completed steps. So then you can see how this relates. This kind of fills in the missing information from our quests, right? If we look at our quest item, obviously, as I mentioned, we have a title, okay? And we're using those to connect them. And then we have completed steps, right? We're filling in the completed steps with that dictionary, as well as if the quest itself has been completed. So that's what's going to be in our current quests. And this is the data that we're going to end up saving with our player save data as well. So just for fun, let's go ahead and pull that up. So if I go to my globals, there's the global save manager. So you can see in here, we've set up, and I'm going to go ahead and just do this. I'm going to paste that same bit of code. This quest bit of the save data, that's just going to look like that. It's going to have a bunch of these for all the stuff that the players actually collected and or completed. Okay. So there we go. Current quests. And so this first find quest will just look for a quest resource that we pass in and return it if it's in our array. And we're not going to be able to do a whole lot with that just yet, but let's go ahead. And for the sake of debugging, I'm going to come up here next to my ready function, and I'm going to say func. Let's add an unhandled input so that we can kind of listen to key presses. And if your project isn't set up like mine, you'll want to do this. I'm going to show you my input map. I've got in here somewhere, here we go, a test key that I've set as P. Okay. So you may want to do something similar. This is a little bit dangerous. If you publish your game with this test key and it does stuff, it could break or provide a way for the player to break your game. But I'm going to use this test key so that we can just test the functionality of what's going on here. So if the event, because you can see an unhandled input provides us with this event, right? So if the event is action pressed test, then we can do something in here. And we'll use this to help test these little functions. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's say find quest. In fact, I'm going to return, or I'm going to print the result of find quest so we can see what happens. And in this case, we need to provide a quest that we want to find. So I'm going to just come down here to my quest folder, and let's just say we want to find recover lost flute quest. So I'm going to say load. I think this will work. As quest. Okay, I've still got an error, so I must be missing something. Probably missing a parenthesis. Like that. So let's go ahead and run the game. And then when we hit P, it should tell us if it can find that quest. And we can see the result is not found. Because the player doesn't have this quest. That quest does not exist in the current quests array. Okay. Now, for sake of testing, actually, let's go ahead and do this. Let's say that this quest equals, and then I'm going to have to fake this because obviously we don't have it. But this, if I look at this recover lost flute, I'm going to copy the text in this title and paste it in here. Okay. So now we've got, that should be an array. So let's give that a square bracket. And I'm going to paste that in there. Okay, there we go. So now our current quests array has that lost quest magical flute. And let's go ahead and just run this again. Now when I hit P, I should expect it to find, there we go. It found the quest, it returned it, and it has the title currently of that. It is not complete, and there are no completed steps, okay? And if we had put something in here or said is complete is true, then that would be reflected in this result that we're returning. So that's how this find quest function is going to work, okay? I hope that makes a little bit of sense. And, you know, for the sake of testing, let's go ahead and leave this current quest in there for right now. All right, let's go down the list here and let's go to the next one, find quest by title. Okay, go ahead again and take this comment, put it outside the function. So this function, we pass in a string that contains the title, and then we want to look through our quests and just return it if we find it. Okay, so here's what we'll do. We'll say for Q in quests, and this one is returning a quest, right? Not one of the completed quests. And so this find quest probably should say find current quest or something like that. I'm going to say provide a quest and return. Yeah, the current associated. Let me just update this comment. Sorry, getting a little sidetracked there. For Q in quests, so in this one, we're looking for the actual quest, not the current quest. We're finding it by title again, so, which this one technically is using the title to find it, but we're passing in an entire quest. So let's just say if Q dot title equals, in this case, it'll be the title that we've passed in. So if the title matches the title on the quest that we're iterating on currently, then we can return that quest. Otherwise, we'll return null. Okay. So now this is a little bit different. Let's come up here. When we do this, instead of printing this out, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to put a new thing to test. In this case, I'm going to print, what was that function? Get quest, or find quest, not get, but find quest by title. And then let's provide a title. We'll use the title short quest. I think that's, let's look at that one. Yeah, short quest. Okay. And this is going to print out probably a resource reference, so it's not going to look super pretty, but let's go ahead and just run this and see if that function works. It should find it. So if I hit P, there we go, it found a resource. Okay, so that's the unique identifier of that resource. That's good. If I were to change this to something like, if I were to misspell this string, for example, and save that, go back to my game, I think this should work. No, it didn't find that. Okay, so this is very sensitive, has to be spelled exactly correct. In fact, even uppercase and lowercase right now would have to be, I'm gonna go ahead and save that. And if I hit P again, it's gonna be null again, okay? You know, for fun, we can go ahead and fix this so that it works. Let's see. Something we can do here, if we don't want it to be case sensitive, then we can go to to lower. Okay, let's go ahead and look at this to lower. So to lower returns a string converted to lowercase. So that's going to remove all the uppercase letters in the string and replace them with lowercase letters. We would want to do that to both. To lower. Okay, so then if we update it like so, and we come up here and we have a lowercase q on quest, or maybe we have it even on the S, right? So everything else matches except the capitalization. It should now find that quest. There we go. I just hit P and there's the quest, the resource. Okay. So there we go. This find quest by title function also works. And there's a little bit of freebie if for those of you who haven't worked with strings before and didn't know about that functionality, it's there. And as you saw, there's several other things, you know, to Pascal, to snake case. I've used this one a few times. It's pretty handy. It basically adds, you can see down here the example, adds these underscores where spaces were. And that's our find quest by title function. All right. So let's do this last kind of search type functionality, get quest index by title. This is a little bit different. We're going to pass in the title of a quest, and instead of getting the quest from the array, right, or the quest from the current quests array, what we want on this one is we want to return the index of the location of that quest on the array, which will be useful for other things that we'll end up doing. But just bear with me now and know that this is needed based on the way I implemented this feature. Okay, so let's look at how this function will happen. It's going to be very similar, short and easy function. And this one we're going to say for I in current quests.size. And what that means is current quests.size is going to return an integer, a value. So let's say that's 10, then it's going to say for I in 10, and we're going to start at 0, and it's going to count up until it gets to 10. Okay, so we're going to do this loop 10 times if there was 10. Because we have three current quests, it's going to do I 3 times. It's going to go 0, 1, 2, and then it's going to stop. And let's just do this. We'll just do a check this way. So we have an index. This I is the value we actually want to return if we find it. Okay, and we have a title. So what we can say is, and we're checking, I think this comment is a little bit misleading. Find the quest by title name and return the index in the current, and this is the current quests array. Okay, so current quests, if current quests at index of I dot title equals title equals the title that we passed into the function, then we found our match, and we can return I. And if none of those conditions pass, then eventually we'll return a -1. Let's just make a comment about this. Return a -1 if we didn't find the title, or I should say if we didn't find a quest with a matching title in our array. Okay, let's go ahead and just test this one out like we've been doing. So let's go up to our unhandled event, and this time we're going to say print, what did we call this one? Get quest index by title, and then let's go ahead and provide it a title. And actually, you know what? I want to go back here real quick. I want to do this to lower case to all of these. Okay, this last one as well. So we're being a little bit more safe with how we check these. Another common way to do this, by the way, is to do to uppercase so that the string is all uppercase letters. Either way it works. Get quest index by title. Boom, boom, boom. Here we go. So we're going to print, I'm going to print that. And we'll return the result. I just need to provide it a title. So in this case, let's go back to our quests. I want to get this recover lost flute that should be right in the middle. Okay. Oops, I need to make that a string. And actually, let's go ahead and do this again. Except this one will do short quest. Okay, so we should get 2 results in our output. Let's go ahead and run that. Oh, I gotta hit P. Gotta hit my test key. There we go. So it found, interesting. I found the first one at index of 0, and then the second one it did not find. Let's look at why that might be the case. So we're checking each of these. It should start at 0. If we never find a match, okay, current quests, title. Oh, yeah, that's why. Because look, we're looking over, it actually worked, okay? Because I was thinking in my brain it would be in the order here, all the quests. But remember, this function is checking our current quests. And if we look at our current quest array, we have recover lost magical flute. And it's the only item in our array, so that's index 0. Okay, so when we look at the output, that was the first one we checked for, we got 0. And then we checked for short quest, not in our array, now it's -1. Okay, and for fun, let's go ahead and just copy and paste this. And I'm going to come in here and rename this second one to be short quest. And we need a comma in between these for an array. You need a comma after each item, before you have another one. Okay, so now if we were to run this again and hit P, we should find both of them. And yep, the second one, short quest, was at index 1. So 0, 1. So that's definitely working. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save this, and we'll move on to the next step. So hopefully at this point, because we're manipulating this current quests array, you can kind of see how this is working. You know, if I were to come in here, for example, and take this short quest and change is complete to true, and I could even go so far as to maybe with this recover lost magical flute, I could put one of the steps in here. I'm going to just copy the first step string, paste it in there. So that's maybe a completed step. Okay. I could come in here and do that. And then that's how that data is going to be reflected when we save it, when we check the quests, etc. But how do we get quests into this current quest array, and how do we update them? And that's what our update quest function is going to be used for. So let's go ahead and start working on this. Now this update quest function is going to be a little bit more complex than the others, okay? And it's going to require us to pass in a few things. An absolute requirement is we're going to do this by title. You've noticed the way I've built this is we're doing all of the quests, or we're finding them and associating them with their title. That means the title can't change. An alternative way, and probably preferable to many people, who are, especially those who are more experienced and might be a stickler for this kind of thing, they would probably have a unique ID field as part of that quest item. So you could go for that if you wanted to. That could be an export variable on the quest itself, and then maybe it's a number and you just give it a number, or whatever the case may be. You kind of probably want something that it has less potential to change, especially if you're building something really large, you know, commercial, where there's a lot of assets and a lot of hands touching it. But for our purposes, making a smaller game, going by the title is okay, as long as you're testing each of those quests and being very careful not to change the title too much. That being said, if you do change the title of a quest, it will work as long as you're starting a fresh game. But if the name of the title changes somehow during the course of the game being played, then it will no longer be able to find the quest by the title name. Okay, so that's kind of a long, maybe a warning that there are other ways to do this. Okay. Now, some other things that we want to do with update quest. Let's think about it. When we update a quest, what are we doing? I'm using update to be a little bit more of a generic term. Update could be adding the quest if the player hasn't yet started it. So it could be starting the quest is another way to say that. Or it could be taking a quest that's in progress and marking one of the steps as complete. Or it could be marking the quest itself as complete. Okay. So those are the three things that we want to be able to track. So obviously the first one, the title, if the player does not yet have the quest in their list, then all we need to add it is the title. And we always need the title, because even if we want to update it, we're still going to look for it by the title. So then the next thing would be, let's just make a variable that we call completed step. And this is a string. And I'm actually going to set this to a blank string by default. So when we do this in defining a function, then this argument becomes optional. You don't have to provide it. Okay. So what that means is, as an example, let's see here, maybe in our unhandled input, we're going to pretend like we call this, right? So let's say we call, or let's leave those there for posterity's sake. Let's say we want to call update quest. You can see in the little hint it's giving there, it says title string, completed step string equals quotes. So we could give a title, right? And maybe we want to update the short quest. And we don't have to provide the completed step. It'll still work. It'll let us call it. You notice it didn't get highlighted in red. We could also call this quest, and we could say update quest. And in this case, I want to grab the name recover lost flute. Boink. Okay, and I'm actually going to take this find the magic flute step. I'm going to take that out. Okay. Because this will be an example for us here. Let's come down here and let's say I want to update this and I want to complete that quest step. Then I would just provide that as the second argument in the function. Okay. And likewise, there is going to be one more variable in here because we mentioned that we want to be able to mark it as completed. Okay. So let's just go is complete. This is the value we want to pass in for is complete. And this would be a Boolean. And by default, let's set it to false. A quick note, once you've once you've made an argument optional by assigning a value to it in the function here, any subsequent argument must also be optional. Okay, it just has to be that way. And then if for any reason we wanted to complete a quest, we can't provide the, if I come up here, I can't just say true or false, it's complete. I couldn't go like this. It's not going to let us. It's going to say, hey, no, we need a string there. So I would still have to give a quest name or at least an empty string. And so let's do an example of what that would look like. So let's go update quest. And we'll just go ahead and do our long quest, I guess. So we'll say long quest. And then we'll do an empty string. We're not going to update a step, but we're going to just say true, that it's been completed. Okay, so these are the three different ways that we could potentially call this function. And essentially how this is going to translate is this one we're only intending to add a quest to the list. This one we want to add a quest or find an existing quest, either or, and also mark this step as completed. And this last one means we want to add or find a quest, and then we want to mark it the completed status to true. Okay, so that's how we're going to call those. So let's see, update quest. So let's dig into this function. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to get a quest index. Okay, so let's say quest index. So this here, and this is an integer. This is where we're going to use our first one of our functions for the first time. So we're going to do get quest index by title and pass in the title. Okay, so there we go. So now we're just looking at to see if we've got it. One of two things is going to happen, right? We're either going to get a number for where that quest is in the array. So if we were to be looking up recover lost magical flute, that's going to be 0. If it was short quest, right, then that would be 1. And in fact, I want to change this to long quest. Because the reason I want to change that is because we're going to just add short quest to our quest list, and then we're going to complete the long quest. Okay, so it's nice to have long quest there as one that's in progress, and then we'll complete it. I should change that to false so that it can change. Okay, so let's go down to let's find our update quest function again. So we're going to get that index, but it could also return a -1, right? So right now short quest is not in the list. So when we pass in update quest, it's going to be -1. So if quest index equals -1, then that means that the quest wasn't found and we need to add it. Okay, so quest wasn't found, we need to add it to the array. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's just make a new variable. We'll call it new quest. Obviously we need to gather this, and it's going to be a dictionary item, okay, of type dictionary. And it's got to look like those things up above, right? It needs to have the title is complete and the completed steps. It needs all those values. So the new dictionary is going to have title equals, and then we say underscore title, the title we've passed in. And likewise, we've got a completed step and is complete Booleans. Okay, so let's just go ahead and assign those, right? We have, now the thing that's bad about these dictionaries is you don't get autocomplete to make sure you spell things right. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. Oops, not cut, but copy. I don't want to paste that in there. Make sure we get that syntax correct. And when we're working with a dictionary, another option, if you don't like it running off the page, we can hit return. We could put each of these values on a new line, like so. Okay. And I'm even going to put this curly bracket down. And normally when we assign a good syntax, you need at least 1 tab for this to work, but 2 is preferable per Godot standards. And by preferable, I mean it's Godot's recommended style guide for how to declare a dictionary like this. Okay, but instead of passing false and this thing here, we're going to say that is complete is going to be equal to the completed step variable, right? Or the argument that we've given here. And likewise, we need to handle this. What I'm going to do here is, obviously, if we didn't ever find the quest, then I'm just going to declare completed steps as an empty array, just like that. Okay. But I want to provide the possibility that for some reason when this was called, maybe the quest didn't exist, but somehow the player not only started the quest, but completed the first step at the same time, right? I mean, that's possible in some games, depending how you build your system. So let's go ahead and make it so we can assign that value in here, but that's conditional because, right, it may not be provided, and we don't really want to put an empty string in here. I know I did up above as an example, right? But we probably don't really want that because it's going to save that way and it doesn't mean anything. So utter update quest, let's do this. After we've made a new quest, let's do a check. If completed step does not equal an empty string. Okay, let's first check. Is there a string in there? Because if there is, then we want to add it. So then we can just go new quest dot completed steps. And then we can append, right? Because it's an array in there. We'll just append the completed step variable, just like that. And then so far what we've done here is we've created a new dictionary and we've assigned the variables as needed, but we need to store that or add it now to our quests array. So let's get our current quests and append, right? Append, just giving it a value that we want to add to our array. And in this case, we want to add the new quest, just like that. And then we also have, I want to point out, we have this signal up here, quest updated. I want to emit this signal. Okay. That's not going to affect anything that we're doing right now. We're not going to be listening to this signal in today's video, but I want to set this up so that it's ready for the future. So we'll just say quest updated.emit. And if you recall, we're wanting to emit the quest. So we'll say new quest like that. And in fact, I made a mistake here. I said that we were emitting a signal of type quest, but it's just going to be one of those dictionaries. So let's remove that type. Just make it be a queue. Okay. All right. So then in the future, we will come back to this in the future tutorial video, because at some point we want to display a notification that quest was added, right? But we're not going to do that right now because we don't have a UI to display that with. But that's how we're going to handle a quest if it's not already found in our quest index. That means there's an else, right? So let's go down here. And this means that the quest was found. We just need to update it. And we already have, we already found the quest index. So we have a way of getting the quest. So let's do this. Let's say variable q equals, and then we want to get our current quests at index, or not I, but quest index, right? Okay, so we'll grab that quest from our array, and then let's do a check down here. So the first thing we want to do is if the quest was already there, let's look at this completed step. Similar to this, we want to check if we had a completed step, make sure it's not a blank value. Okay, but we also don't want to add the completed step multiple times. That shouldn't happen if our game is designed well, but to avoid weird issues where that could happen, let's also account for that. So I'm going to copy this little line, that if statement. So if completed quest does not equal an empty string, and then let's put an and in here, and, which means two conditions have to pass. So let's do this. Let's say Q is our current quest. So Q dot completed steps. Let's check the current quest and see if the completed steps array has this value. So if it has, we got to pass in that completed step value, right? And we don't want to see if it has it. Actually, we want to make sure it doesn't have it. So if that equals false, then we know we can update it, right? Okay, so just to repeat that, if we have a completed step value, if it's not a blank string, and if that string is not already found in the list of completed steps, then let's add it. So then we can just simply come here and q.completed steps. Got to make sure we spell this the same every time. Dot append, and just put that completed step value right in there. Okay. Make sure that matches. Yeah, that looks good. Likewise, we've got a couple other values that we could set here, right? Or we've got an is complete. So we could say q.isComplete equals underscore is complete, whatever was passed in. And then last but not least, we'll say quest updated dot emit, and we'll just emit this quest that we're looking at. Okay. And then likewise, you know how we said we want to display notification if a quest was added? We could also display notification in the future if a quest was updated or completed, right? Because we might want to display something different if it was completed than if it was just updated. So here, let's test this. This is how we're going to test this. Let's come up here to our unhandled input. We've got these different button presses, and I want to do this. I want to do them one at a time without having to restart so much. Actually, yeah, here, this will be easy. Let's just do this. I'm going to comment each of these out. And let's go ahead and let's print the current quests before. And so let's go ahead and put a tag before, comma, current quests. And then we'll do an after update. I'm going to say after. And we should see the changes. And I'm going to go ahead and just print a bunch of equal signs after we do this as well, so that we've got a separator when we do it again. So I'm going to save this. Let's hope everything works. So now if I hit my P key, you can see before, here's the array. And the first time we did, what did we do? Update quest with short quest. And so here before we have recover lost magical flute quest, and we have long quest. And you can see that long quest is the last quest. Now here we've got both those quests, but now there's also short quest. Okay, and we can see that the values is complete is false. You know, we didn't set anything here, so it's just a string, which is interesting, but that's fine. So let's go back. Let's look at this. Let's go ahead and comment out. You know, some of these changes are, you'll notice I did this earlier. I haven't stopped running the game. It's still running. So I'm just going to comment that one out, and I'm going to uncomment this one. So right now, our recover lost magical flute has no completed steps, right? That's this quest right here. So let's uncomment this line. I'm going to hit Control S to save it. And then I'm simply going to come back to the quest here. I'm just going to hit P again, and that'll run that little function again. So here's the before, recover lost magical flute, no steps. After, recover lost magical flutes now has this completed step for find the magical flute. Cool. So let's test this last line, which would be to complete, mark our long rest quest as complete. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and change that, save it. Then I'll go over to the game again, hit P, and come back. Okay, so let's see. We wanted to complete the long quest. Here's our new bit of output. And we've got long quest is what, the second one? Title, long quest, there it is. Is complete, false. Long quest is complete, true. So there we have it. That function is quite simple in what it's doing, but we're going to be able to utilize it to really do a whole lot. And I designed it to be this simple and do these limited number of things for a very specific reason. And that's so that we can make a quest system that's not going to be hopefully confusing or hard to implement, especially because many of the people following along these tutorials have never built a system like this before. And so hopefully this feels comfortable for everybody. And at the same time, I believe it's going to be pretty robust. I think it's going to really allow a lot of functionality. So far, we've built out a lot of these functions, and most of the functionality, actually, I mean, I'm looking at all this commented out stuff. Let's go down to our update quest. Most of the functionality is now pretty complete in here. A couple things we haven't done. Disperse quest rewards. Okay, giving experience and item rewards to the player, and saving the quest. And as you recall from this diagram here, the kind of the first thing we want to connect our quest manager to is our player manager and our save manager. And I'd like to complete that in this video. And then subsequent videos, we'll move on to the other features, okay? So we're going to start with that here. Let's go back to our project and let's hook that up. So the first thing we can do, I think, is let's do this disperse quest rewards, okay? Give these to the player. And in order to do this, we have an item system. We don't have an experience system, right? So let's start real quick with the experience. And we're not going to do anything super crazy with this, but let's find our player manager. So if you go to the file system globals, if you've been following along with this, you have a player manager script. And you may have some other way. If you're not following along with this one, with this particular series, then maybe you have some other way where you want to, some other place or script where you want to store. I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to give this player manager an experience value and set it to 0 by default. And then let's create a function. We've got functions to update the health of our player. Let's make a function to reward experience points to our player. And of course, when we're rewarding the experience points, we need to provide a value. We'll just call it underscore XP, and it'll be an integer. And it'll be really as simple as just saying XP, right? Plus equals underscore XP. And because we haven't been using this system in our game just yet, I'm just going to do a little print. Oh boy, print. And then we want to print our experience points out, which is an integer, so we need to convert it to a string. So string of XP, and then maybe we'll just come over here and we'll just say XP equals, and add that on there. Okay, so we'll just see what the value is. And if we wanted to, we could print how many experience points were added or rewarded, but there we go. And while we're in our player manager script, let's go ahead and let's just look. We've got this inventory data. And this inventory data script is where we do all of our item and inventory management. And in fact, there's an add item function right here. Okay, so we can just utilize this as existing code. If you are not following along with this project and have your own, then you can devise your own way. But hopefully this is pretty straightforward. And if you are new, then go back and find, and I can put a link to it in the description, but find this inventory series of tutorials that are part of this, and you can add that to your project as well. So let's go back to our QuestManager system, and let's hook this up in here. The first thing we can do is we can say player manager, and then we've got that new reward XP function. Okay, and I guess before we can disperse the quest rewards, we left something off, didn't we? We need the quest here. And we need the quest resource, not the current quest information. So we need to pass in that. Okay, so there we go. We'll pass that in. And then that way we can come in here and we can just say q.reward XP. And because we could have multiple items, what we're going to do is we're going to say for I in, let's see, q.reward items, right? Because if we go back to our quest folder, we made that an array, and I think our flute, it's going to try and reward 2 different items. So reward items, we're going to iterate over those. And then for each one, we're going to go to our player manager and grab the inventory data. And then we're going to call the add item function on that. And we can just pass in this add item function accepts the item as well as the count, how many we're rewarding. And I guess we named those a little bit differently on our quest, right? On our quest, we've got items. So each item thing here, right? This is a quest reward item. It's got an item and a quantity. So they're i.item and then i.quantity. Just pass those in, and then it should go through and it should reward each of those items to the player. We can actually come back up here to our update quest, and under here where we're updating the quest, this branch, I'm going to actually go ahead and right here where we're displaying a notification, I'm not going to actually display the notification now, but we can at least kind of start this. We'll just say if q.isComplete equals true, right? Then we want to reward the item. So we'll just say disperse quest rewards, and we can go underscore, well, we need to pass in, what is it? Oh, it's just q, right? Pass in the quest there that we need. And then this will pass the quest into our new function that we're writing here and allow it to have all the information we need. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and save this. Now, let's go ahead and go up here, and let's just go in here, and we'll just update each quest and say that it's completed. Here, let's go ahead and run this. And if I look, let's start by looking at the inventory, right? There's nothing in my inventory. We're not really showing the experience points, but we should see that come out in the console. So if I hit P, then it crashes the game. It's exactly what I wanted to happen. Let's go ahead and stop this and let's look. Oops. In fact, I guess stopping that's bad. Let me run that again and check out that error. I don't know why I didn't keep it. P. Okay. Invalid type, disperse quest rewards in base node. Can't convert argument from dictionary to object. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Because here we're updating the current quest, but this is expecting not the current quest, but the thing from the item array. So when we do this disperse quest rewards, we want to find quest by title. There we go. We're going to use one of these. And then we can just pass in the underscore title, which is the title of the quest we've been working on, right? Let's go ahead and run this again. It should work this time. Okay. Again, check. Nothing in our inventory. Let's hit P. And what did we get in the console? XP equals 50. That's good. And then if I hit escape, I've got 3 apples. So something worked. So which quest did we just complete? Long quest. Let's just double check that. Obviously, we must have got the right one, but long quest rewards was 3 apples. So now let's look at the recover lost flute quest. In this quest, we're going to reward 100 experience points. So this value should go from 50 to 150. And then we're going to reward 100 gems and 5 potions. So let's just come here. I'm going to grab this quest name. And I'm just going to pop it here. Obviously, we're skipping steps and we're just completing it, but I'm going to save that and go back to the game, hit P. There we go, XP 150. And then if I hit escape, items in our inventory. Now the last step is to hook up save and load. Okay, so right now, if I were to save my game and then come in here and load it, the inventory is there, and this is actually hard to show. But if I were, well, let's go over here. Let's come here. Let me just print the current quests, and I'll just change this to say quests. Save. Because we just completed these, right? We should have that this quest is completed, and so is long quest, because that's what we just were testing. So if I hit P, it's going to print out my quest for me. We can see that recover is true and completed is true. Huh. Well, that's working because we're not loading it at all. We'll go ahead and run it again. Obviously, we've got issues with save and load, right? But if I come here and hit load and then come back, or I guess I got to hit P and come back. Now we can see that this is completed as false. So saving and loading did not work in either case. In fact, what's happening is we only have current quests that are stored per game session, right? And what we want, I mean, that's almost what we want. What we want is it's per save game when you load and close the save game. But actually hooking this up to work is going to be fairly straightforward. Once we hook into our save system, then this is going to start working pretty good. So what we want to do here is let's open up our save manager. Okay. So we already kind of showed where these quests are going to be saved. But in order for this to work and come full circle, we need to actually save the data and load it. Okay, it's going to be pretty straightforward. So if we look at our save game function, we've got update player data, update scene path, update item data. What we need in here is an update quest data so that we can update and save that data before we go. And obviously that's going to give us a warning because that function doesn't exist. Let's just come down here though and let's create that. We'll do it right after update item data. So new function, update quest data. And all this needs to do is it needs to get our current save. And let's just look at this up here. Current save, we want to store our stuff in this quests. And this is just a dictionary, kind of like what we've been doing. So we can come down here, current save.quests equals, and because we've been tracking all of this in our quest manager, it's super trivial to grab it. So we just go QuestManager.current quests. And there we go. Because we've been storing the current quests in this, if we leave that as an underscore, not a dash, then we're going to have an error. Since we've been storing the current quests in a dictionary format, it will plop in here with no issue whatsoever. Okay, makes it super easy to use. And that's one of the reasons behind why I decided to just leave the, you know, in the quest manager, the current quests just as a dictionary, because then it works seamlessly with our save system that we've built. Okay, so now when we save our game, this update quest data can call as well, and we'll save that data. That'll become part of our save data before we save it. And then likewise, when we load our game, I guess we need to do the same thing, right? We need to load the current save stuff. And so let's go down, let's find our load game function. And here in our load game, we do a couple things, right? We get our load data, load the level, and then in between the level load starting and finishing is where we kind of do all of our stuff to update the player. And you can see we've got our inventory here. So just right here, we'll just add another line of code, and we're going to say QuestManager, QuestManager dot current quests equals, and then all we have to do is get our current save dot quests. Okay, because again, this is already in the same format. Whereas these things, we have this like parse save data or these functions to help us convert the data over. We don't have to do that with the quests because they're already in that same native format. So I'm just going to go ahead and save this. And then let's look at our global quest manager. I want to go to our unhandled input. Okay, so right now we're printing our current quests. Okay, so let's go ahead and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to delete the quests from this because that's how we want it to work. So our current quests array is going to start as an empty array. Let's go ahead and run the scene. All right. So now if I hit P, you can see that the quests array is empty because we're printing them. Let's go ahead and update this. Let's add a quest to our list. And I want to add this short quest maybe, and I want to remove these other variables. Let's just add the quest. Come back over here and hit P. And we should see the quest there. Short quest. It's complete, not set, and no completed steps. And likewise, we could add this recover magical flute. And I'm going to go ahead and just cut this out for just a second. Hit P. There we go. We've got our two quests in there. And then we could just put that little complete step back in. And then when we test again, we should see that the recover lost magical flute now has completed step. And just for fun, let's go ahead and update this short quest to be complete. So we don't have any steps to complete. So we just need to set that to true in that last variable. Save one more time and go back to the game. So hopefully this works. Hit P. There we go. I got experience points. I have quests. This one is completed. So I guess the final moment of truth is let's come in here and let's save the game. That's interesting. Does our short quest not give anything other than, yeah, it only gave experience. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and stop. So now what should happen is when I run again, instead of, if I hide this, if I just hit P and print out my current quests, after I load my game, they should be there, right? So here we go, ready? I'm gonna start by hitting P and seeing that quests is empty. I guess I could just move this up, but okay, let's go ahead and load the game. We're basically in the same spot. Now if I hit P, there we go. The quests information has been saved. And then of course, when we start a new game, etc., that save and load script is always going to work how it should. And we're going to end up with just having the quests that we need at all times. So that's the first video in a series of videos about making the quest system. I hope you guys have learned something. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and, so you can follow and see what's coming in the future. If you enjoyed the video, if you learned something new, give me a thumbs up, drop some comments down in the comment section below. Those things help my channel grow. And of course, I want to give a shout out to my Patreon members who are supporting me and invite you to join Patreon if you feel so inclined to do so. The Patreon members currently just have a few exclusive things like the credits that are rolling, as well as access to a private Discord channel. They also are able to vote and make their voices heard in private polls and things like that I do. So thank you again to everybody. And as always, we'll see you next time.